G'day, I'm Peter Bender from Bundaberg Commercial, and I'm the principal of the business, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the boss. And today I thought we'd actually go back to basics to help a lot of those new investors, and we're going to talk about the different types of commercial properties. Now, I'm not going to talk in depth on all of them. I'll just quickly go through the 6 or 7 types that I see them as. And if you want to know more, then do me a favor in the comments section, tell me which ones you want me to do extra videos on, and I will do in-depth videos on the particular ones that you give me feedback for. Nice circle. Be good to me. Tell me what you need, and I'll produce it for you. All right. So the first thing to recognize is when you look at residential property, it's pretty easy, isn't it? You've got a house or you've got a unit. There's like 2 types. It's, not rocket science there. In commercial property, it's so complicated actually that we can't even agree on what types of commercial property there is. I've watched one of the leading commercial realtors in Sydney, I think he is, and he explains that there's 3 types of commercial property. He looks in regards to office, retail, and industrial. So we'll tackle those, and then I'll give a balance of what is also happening overseas and what is happening in other parts of Australia, and a little bit of experience on different types, because I think there's more than just the 3. 3 would be nice, but sometimes life is just a little bit more complicated than 3. All right, so the first one that we talk about is what's called office space. Now, office space is essentially where you've got open plan offices, maybe some secluded offices for managers. It's carpeted. It's really easy to run, very little maintenance. You get your tenants to do the fit out for it. And when they leave, we have a make do clause, which essentially says the premises needs to be in just as good a nick, or bad a nick, just as good a nick as when they leave as when they came in. So if you had painted walls and new carpet, then when they leave, they need to leave painted walls and new carpet. It's a nice, easy one to work with. Okay, so the flip side on it is currently there's about a 15% vacancy right nationally. So that's probably more than what you're comfortable with. I used to work for the Australian Taxation Office, and I was responsible for the accommodation portfolio. So that means I had to house 18,000 staff. And that was done in 32 or 36 commercial high-rises and medium density buildings around the country. 15% vacancy was huge. I used to battle trying to find space when we were looking at 3 to 4%. That was probably a little bit tight. A normal market where you've got a bit of choice for both buyer and seller is around about the 6 to 7%. With the current vacancy rate, a lot of that, as you can probably expect, is everybody went home to work after COVID, during COVID, and not many of them returned. They're actually saying, hey, I enjoy this life and I can do my job just as well from home. And I've been working remotely for decades now. So there's pros and cons, but it's definitely a good option. But it did create a glut of vacancy in the office space. The other things with office space, you need to recognize it's really only going to be in the central street of town if you're in a regional area, or in high rises in capital cities. And not many of us are able to buy entire building blocks like 18 stories in Brisbane. So it's one for the big players, and a lot of them tend to be the corporations. So the first option is office space. So you can have a look at that. If you do get office space, what you want to do is try and get someone like accountants or lawyers or medical professionals. They're good for taking up the space and being there for a fair time. Get one of those, and you're pretty right for a good 5 or 10 years, all going well according to the plan. So the second category that they spoke about was retail. Retail is, once again, needs to be based generally on a high traffic area. So it's in shopping centres, which is very expensive, or it's on main streets, which is less expensive. And you really want to try and find yourself some what we call recession-proof customers. Okay, what's a recession-proof customer? All right, so you're looking at supermarkets and professional medicals, particularly if you're looking in like neighbourhood shopping centres, which traditionally can be a little bit hard to fill. If you pick yourself up with a bottle from the local pub, they tend to be fairly stable. I remember, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but every shopping centre used to have a video outlet, but now you don't have many of those. So that sort of aspect. Do you want something with a national chain or a big franchise? The plus side is you will have to be a reliable tenant, but the downside is you probably won't get anywhere near the margins because they'll push and work hard because a lot of people are going to work on them. So retail is retail, fairly easy to explain, and it is similar with the make do clause. There's not a lot of maintenance required in those sort of spaces. And the third area that they spoke about in regards to types of commercial property is what they call commercial. And commercial would be, in their view, is e-commerce demands for storage. So whilst many people didn't bother returning to work and going to the offices, they did order stuff. So there's a lot of companies that needed distribution centers near transport hubs and the likes of that. Food demands for cold storage, particularly once again, transport, distribution, that sort of aspect. If you get into that, they tend to be very big warehouses. If you go into some of the capital cities, you'll find entire suburbs that, they've got like multiple football fields together just to store one particular client, their need for food production and cold storage and freezer works. And that space, the commercial area, is around about 1% vacancy rate nationally currently in Australia. So it is darn hard to get space. Now, the pendulum will swing. More people are building complexes to suit those sort of clients. Everybody wants to make money, so they go where the demand is. And that may be an option for you to have a look at. So the three general consensus types of commercial property was office, retail, and commercial. Now, I would add to that industrial. Okay, what's industrial? Industrial for me is where you have manufacturing and trades. It's a different animal to commercial because you do have a little bit more maintenance, particularly with trade waste and zonings, that sort of type aspect. The sheds tend to be more steel, depending on where they are, and better block. So there's not a lot of work goes in. You don't need to do a lot of maintenance because most of those guys who are doing trades and girls doing trades don't need sort of work in the area. But you probably find there's more work on that because you're dealing with more of an external buildings. If you have like an office or you have retail, quite often you can be multi-levels. So if you're 5 levels up, and the client on level 3 is not going to have much issues in regards to rains coming through the roof or issues like that. Their main issue is probably only going to be aircon and making sure the lift works. Whereas in industrial premises, if accidents happen, someone drives a truck through a wall, you got theft, it's a little bit higher maintenance. So make sure you don't borrow to the hilt, as I say. Allow about 5 or 10% of the purchase price just for those incidentals. Quite often you'll need to put in particular power, 3-phase power for clients. You may need to put in different trade waste, sewage and septic to enable the business to do its work. Be close with council, understand exactly what type of tenant you can put in there, and work from there. I like it. It's sexy. It's sassy. It's lets you know what's going on. It's where Real Australia gets a lot of the business from. So I've got a lot of love industrial. All right, what else can we have? All right, one of the things that is underestimated, underutilized is what's called land banking. And what's land banking? It's not money banking, but it could be. It's not ANZ banking or Commonwealth banking. It's land banking. That's basically buying a block of land. Now, when you buy a block of land, you can do one of two things. You can do no development on it. The capability for this is for those with high taxable incomes. You get yourself a block of land in a strategic area and do nothing with it. All you really have to pay is your rates, and council probably sends you a note every 4 months to go get the block slashed. So it's not a lot of expense on there, and you can use that to offset your higher income tax rates. And the reason people do it is essentially they know that you can make money 2 ways out of commercial property. You've got your income and you've also got your asset growth or your equity growth. There's other types that we talked about, having an office, having retail, having industrial, having commercial. They will all get you income, and they will also, if you've got the right spot, have equity growth on there. Whereas a land bank, you're not going to get your income if you've got a non-developed section, but you will get your asset growth. Now, you can also do light development on a land bank. Light development, particularly in America, it's very popular. It can be anything like you can put some storage sheds up, which is probably not light development. I'd call that medium. But quite often people will just level the block and make it for truck parking. Okay, you're getting income from that. I've got a client who needs an acre to put a concrete batching process plant on. So he's basically going to need a spot to put 4 piles of dirt in a machine that makes cement. That's no requirement for the owner of the block to do any development. But the client in that instance is going to get income as well as the growth. Land banking is very simple. It's fairly risk-free because, I probably should never use the word risk-free, because you're not having to worry about tenants, you're not having to worry about the buildings, maintenance and the likes of that. You can't do much to a block of dirt as long as it's not a petrol station or going to have like diesel drums or things like that. You may need to just be aware of it and vigilant and make sure it doesn't leak onto the property. Last thing you want to do is getting onto contaminated land registers. But land banking, and the other thing I like about that is it's cheap. Like if you want to buy that office building, you're probably looking, well over the $1 million. If you want to look at buying a retail complex or a set of shops, once again, you're talking multi-million dollars. If you're looking for an industrial shed, depending on where you are, starting price is $250,000 and working upwards, and $250,000 probably isn't going to get you much more than a dog box or something that needs a lot of work. Probably look about the 350 upwards. Whereas a block of land, you can pick that for whatever price budget you've got. And banks are usually comfortable to borrow against a block of land. So there's a good plus. In regional Australia, I'd also have a look at farmland and also accommodation. Now, farmland is fairly obvious. I've got a developer, he buys farmland and makes them into hobby farms because there's a lot of people come from the cities and just want to get a lifestyle farm, get, 5 acres, a couple of cow, a duck, a goose out the backyard. Yeah, they're quite happy. So that's an option there. But also you've got the normal production. You can quite often lease the farmland, either for crops or adjustment for, lots of people have horses. You'd be surprised, especially when you're getting into the semi-suburban area. People want to have a horse, but they've got nowhere to put them. So you do need to make sure they take care of the horse. That's the other side. And I mentioned accommodation. There's 2 types of accommodation in regional areas. You've got caravan parks, which is like a concept of land banking, but you're getting income in there, and you haven't had to put too much infrastructure in there, apart from a dunny and a bathroom and maybe a kitchen. And you've also got motels and hotels. So that's the commercial bracket of accommodation. And I have that as a separate one because it's quite a big industry, and it really is unique in the way that it's priced and it's folded and it's managed. Finally, in the US, they have a couple of other types of categories for commercial properties. And that's because there's 280 million Americans, so the economy is like 10 times as big as ours. So they have the diversity to have more categories. One of the categories they talk about over there is multi-dwelling or complex units. Now, in Australia, we would consider that to be residential investment. So if you've got like a block of units of 10 units or such like that, we call that a residential investment. In America, they call it multi-dwelling units. So if you hear that term in regards to commercial property, it tends to be American-based in that one. Also in America, they have what's called flex space, which we don't have a real lot of. Although some of the big organizations, I remember once again when I worked with Telstra, we had buildings, the newer buildings, the green capability buildings would have what's called a flex space. So you could use it for various things at various times. Houses is an option. We're having a look at converting one of our bedrooms into a flex space. So it'll multi-purpose essentially. It'll be the office, it'll be the gym, it'll be the video room, it'll be a spare bedroom. That's what I mean by flex space. In a commercial sense, they can have a look at different areas. People can use the space at different hours. I've had one client, he was a butcher. He used a large area of his commercial property for the butchering operations, which starts in the morning, and in the evening it was used as a truck transport depot. So that was similar to a flex space. Flex space tends to be more in regards to offices in that sort of category, different shifts, different purposes. So the idea of it is to be flexible. depending on what the client needs are. If the client needs change, sometimes they may have seasonal workforce, so they may require more office space at particular times, or they may need less office space at other times. So that's flex space. All right, I think that gives you the categories to work through. So just recapping them for you. You've got office space, you've got retail space, you've got industrial space, you've got commercial space, you've got land banking, farmland, accommodation, and you could throw in multi-dwelling and flex space. So how do you decide on which you want to do? Well, firstly, I pick two because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And if it doesn't work out for you in your research, you don't want to spend hundreds of hours to find out you don't like it. So how do you pick on the two that you want to go? Keep life simple, one and two. All right, budget would be a big factor. How much you've got cash or how much you can borrow and what sort of borrowing capacity you've got. Talk to your financier because they may look at certain categories and just rule you right out of it from the start. So look, you're just not going to get any funding for office space, for argument's sake, of 15% vacancy rate. A lot of lenders are going, oh, no, I'm not interested in that. They may steer you into something else. Have a look also in regards to what you're passionate about. For argument's sake, I'm passionate about commercial property. So when I went into real estate, I didn't worry about learning about units. I didn't worry about learning about houses. I didn't worry about learning about dog kennels. It was all commercial that I worked on. Use a similar approach. If two of those categories sort of make your eyes go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. Or, oh, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. Because the passion is very important in anything that you do, and it'll help you to get through those dry times when you've got to do the hard work and you're not seeing a lot of return, or your tenancy is a little bit empty and you just got to wait for that to come through. Being passionate about your property will get you a long way. And the third area I'd recommend is education. So whichever two you look at, see if there's something that you already have a head start on, know a little bit about, and use that as leverage to work with. I'm essentially lazy. If you know a fair bit about industrial storage, then go down that path to start with. You're less likely to make greenhorn mistakes, as they say, if you've already got a head start and some experience. The second thing is find some people who've got the commercial type property that you're looking for. Buy them a coffee. Tell them to dump on your toe the things that worked, the things that didn't. Now, remember the commitment that I would like to get from you is to let me know which videos you want me to make more in depth. So put some comments in, and if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button so that when those other videos do come out, you get notified. All right, take care and God bless.